So in a couple of days, there's going to be a big announcement of some kind for Guild Wars 2, the future of the MMO, what the devs are looking at next. Over the past several months since Dragonfall came out and the Living World Season 4 stuff concluded, the game and the community has been in a really weird place. A place where we don't really know how much ArenaNet cares about the MMO, how long term they're thinking for it, what's going on with future expansions, what's going on with future Living World. It hasn't been great. Particularly, people are concerned considering the layoffs for other studio projects and the acknowledgement that the devs had been splitting their focus and looking at stuff that wasn't Guild Wars 2 earlier in the year, and the fact that the story has been pretty much calibrated to have potentially concluded as of the most recent episode. This episode here, War Eternal, it was supposedly written to be a potential end for Guild Wars, and you can really feel it as you play through that patch. It feels like it could have been the conclusion. Of course, it's not, and we know that all the layoffs happened and whatever other projects were going on were cancelled, and now it's like, well, what are you doing with Guild Wars 2? How much do you care about Guild Wars 2? Why aren't we in an expansion right now? What's going on? We've been waiting and waiting on the 30th in just a couple of days, and I would really put it in your calendars and make sure you don't miss it, guys. We're going to get those answers. Now, I've already talked loosely about this topic, and it comes up constantly on my streams, but for today's video, I wanted to list out the top 8 things I think are most likely to be discussed on this big announcement, what the devs will really be talking about and what we should pay attention to. Some of this stuff is stuff I really want, some of this stuff is stuff I'm really nervous about, but I think there's 8 solid ideas here I've got for what we think the devs might go through, and well, I wanted to discuss them. So let's start off with very likely and pretty much guaranteed to come up. My first thing I want to talk about is just Living World Season 5. Remember when they announced this announcement, it came with that image of the Living World logo under a new color scheme, suggesting of like the fire and the ice. We think that that's probably somewhat reflective of what the story will be about. That is the next Elder Dragons we're going to. Jormag's on the table, Primordus is on the table, the Deep Sea Dragon to an extent. I've heard some interesting theories that this icon is actually just the Path of Fire icon being taken over by a new color. But basically, yeah, I think that we're going to be looking at Living World Season 5. I think that's going to be the main focus of the announcement. We may not get anything beyond Living World Season 5 topics, but this could be anywhere from a year to 2 years of the next season. And we know from April 2nd, the big blog post the devs did back then, that for the next Living World season, they were looking at changing up the format a little bit. Not every episode necessarily has to be adding an entirely new map like we've seen for the past 3 years. Ever since Bloodstone Fen came in, each patch has added a new map. Well, the devs seem like they might be wanting to get away from that. They're open to instead expanding existing maps and being a bit more fluid with it. So I think we're going to see a lot of stuff about Season 5, and not necessarily just about the story, but how they're going to scope it. How regularly these patches will come out. Is it going to be just 6 and will end? Are they going to go more? And how short or large the patches will be, how free the content teams are to add or subtract from the size of a release. I think we're going to see Season 5 end up feeling a little bit closer to Season 1. If you remember, Season 1 was all over the place with the size of its patches. Some of them weren't even announced as they came into the game. And then they tried to standardize things with Season 2, but went a bit too far with the crunch. Then they found this rhythm on the Season 4 and 3. I think we're going to find some kind of middle ground between 1 and 4 and 3, the way that they've done that there, that works better for the studio. And I think the past few months behind closed doors, the devs have been figuring out exactly what that means to them. And we're going to get those details on the 30th. Yeah, I think most of the entire show is going to be about that. But beyond that as well, I think we're obviously going to get something about the story. It's really important that the devs instill some sense of urgency in the player base about the story. Because, yeah, it's on such a conclusory, like, note right now. It's in such a place where you really could just pull the camera away from Tyria right now and leave it. And, yeah, there's some dragons, but we know they're not very active. And it's kind of like a happy ending. That's a disaster. I think we're going to move into some new territory. I think we'll leave a lot of characters behind. I think we'll start looking at some new ones. And maybe some of the characters that haven't had much to do lately, like Marjorie, they could, you know, shine a spotlight on once again. Especially this idea that mechanically Season 5 might have maps, releases that don't even take us to new territories, but entirely focus on existing territories. Well, that's a good way to make a lot of use of established characters. You know, we start looking at a lot of Crichton stuff again. Maybe Marjorie has something to do. Mind you, Living World Season 3 had the whole Crichton Civil War stuff, and, you know, we only got a certain amount of screen time for certain characters anyway from that. But yeah, that's what I believe. And as far as the story goes, that's really not what this video is about, but my main speculation is definitely Jormag oriented. What with the hints that we've seen with Dragon Bash and going forwards, We've actually just had a Black Lion set called the Ocean Weapons come into the game, which is kind of strange, but I'm not sure how much we need to read into that. They also did a mini story very recently where the leader of the Black Lion Trading Company disappeared and now has returned, but I don't know whether the devs will actually pull around with that. But yeah, I'm thinking Sons of Svarnir, I'm thinking Jormag, and especially the mini patch lately that added mysterious strangers around various mountain areas, and we hear whispers and mysterious corruption around them. It's looking like we might be going north. It's looking like we might be seeing Shiver Peak stuff. That kind of disappoints me a little, I will say, going north, just because I think there's so much interesting stuff going on in the Path of Fire region still. I still want a map that connects Ebonhawk to the Crystal Desert. I still want to see the Matani Keys and the Latenda Bog, and I still want to go to, like, Dazlana and stuff. There's a lot of places, even, like, the Scavenger's Causeway is fairly close to the Elonian regions. I like the idea of having another season that's set around this, a season that's tied to POF. But that doesn't seem like what the devs are going for now. There is a mechanical question here as well, in what do we consider the next season to be? Is it a Path of Fire season? Will it require we have this expansion to play? Is it going to be under this color scheme? Is it going to say Season 5 and it will be this color? Like how we had Vanilla and then 2 seasons. Will it be Path of Fire and 2 seasons? And it would be Heart of Thorns at the Aberration, only having 1 season attached to it? Or are they going to consider this like a core season or something? These are things I think the announcement will have to talk to us about, and we're going to get those answers for sure. Moving on, let's talk more specifically about within the scope of the next Living World season, what they might do feature-wise, and I think that these might take center stage going forward too. Let's talk about Masteries. This is my point number 2. I think we should get something at the announcement to do with Masteries. Now, why is that? Ever since Heart of Thorns, the devs really have pushed Masteries as this big thing for their horizontal progression, and we can argue till we're blue in the face how that system failed or succeeded. But what we've mostly noticed is with Season 3, they really struggled adding interesting Masteries. Like, the Masteries they added were very, very, very strange. Like with the, wait, where would we actually see them? Are they under? Yeah, they're here. Ancient magics. A lot of weird, different things like the thermal tubes and like the fires that we could get in Bitter Frost Frontier or the siren songs. Look at all the detail they put into this for Ore. And then they've never kind of gone back to these. And they've talked very openly on live streams before about how Masteries were difficult to do. Then Path of Fire rolled round. And for Path of Fire, they've mostly kept Mastery stuff to do with mounts, right? We had all mount-oriented Masteries for launch, going all the way up to the Griffin and the Hidden One. Then we had the Roller Beetle Mastery selection, we've had the Sky Scale Mastery selection, and then we've had the Aurene Masteries. But again, these have all been about interacting with mounts. They've been giving us, you know, the Bond of Faith and the Bond of Vigor and the Bond of Life. So where does the next season go? They can't keep adding bonds for our mounts. I mean, maybe there's a couple of ideas or a few more. And then what else do they do? Well, you could say mounts themselves. And I definitely think that Season 5 probably will add new mounts, and that will be a big part of Masteries. But there's only so many Guild Wars 2 can add. If you really think about it, there's a limitation with like the UI and the key bindings, and just the idea of every mount in this game has a specific movement. It's a tool for a specific type of traversal. There's only so many tools that they can offer us. I really only see 2 more particularly convincing mounts. One would be some kind of multiplayer mount. I think that could be very exciting. And another would be some kind of underwater travel mount, with the ocean weapons coming in the Black Lion set, and maybe if the Deep Sea Dragon ends up becoming a thing, maybe we'll see that Hydra concept art of them attacking Lion's Arch being a thing for the next Living World season. You might find an underwater mount. But that's 2 mounts. I really do think there's only 2. After that, they're just going to be too similar. The Warclaw, for example, already feels too similar to, like, the Raptor or maybe even the Sandjackal. And I don't want to see the devs adding mediocre mounts. So what do they do with Masteries after that? Well, I bet the studio's been thinking about that, and we might get those details on this update for the 30th. Next, another big feature, point number 3, is build templates. I'm pretty sure that one thing that would be very exciting and epic for them to talk about on the 30th would be showing us build templates. They have confirmed, publicly acknowledged, build templates are something they're working on. It was another one of those things from the April 2nd blog post. I don't have too much more to add to this, except they've really filled out a lot of legendaries lately. They've changed the customized windows for a lot of gear that we've had lately. I think it's all in preparation for build templates. I think a lot of stuff they've done for a long time now is, and that would be a fantastic feature to drop in with this season, and a fantastic thing to excite people about playing the season. If they find a way to give us limited build template slots, but you can unlock new slots from playing Living World episodes and beating challenges in Living World episodes. If they do something cool with it based on Living World content itself, rather than just selling stuff on the gem store all the time, I think that could be a huge, very compelling and profound reason for people to proper get into the game and this season as it goes forwards. Because it's like a new Living World episode comes out, sweet, I can get more build templates and I can do more fun stuff like that. So yeah, I think the 30th, that would be a brilliant thing to pair with this next Living World season. They'd be fools not to talk about it. Some kind of on-screen trailer or demonstration, or it'd be very good. Next, let's just talk about, as our point 4, the other sort of lesser features, but all that we know the devs are working on, and I think we should get some more information about. So, looking back at the April 2nd blog post, there's the big World versus World update for a long time that we've known they're one to work on. It'd be really cool if they had something about alliances, if they had something more tangible to show off. The devs do regularly live stream themselves playing World versus World, and they don't really drop many hints or, you know, suggestions about how the work with that stuff's going. I think that'd be very good to see on the 30th. I think Cooking 500 just got added. It was a big content drop that just came in like yesterday before I recorded this video with you guys. But on April 2nd, they also talked about Dueling 500. Now, if they're doing a section on build templates, as I mentioned a second ago, maybe Dueling 500 would tie into that somehow. We could see a whole section on that. Then some of the other features people have been asking for, like fishing or player housing and whatnot, I'm not so confident about. I feel like they might be expansion scope more than anything else, but you never know. I'll point out that they could end up in the 30th. I guess we'll see. The other thing that I'll point out at this point as well is legendary acquisition. It's a bit of a weird position, a bit like masteries actually, and it's like, okay, this most recent episode, Dragonfall, gave us the final Gen 2 legendary. There is now a full selection of Gen 1 and Gen 2 legendary weapons. Where did the devs go from here? Maybe it was their plan to sort of start dusting their hands off with Guild Wars 2 and move us onto something new and special at this point. But now that's fallen through, they've got many more years that they need to look at with Guild Wars 2. What do they do from the legendary front? Do we get another set of legendary armor? Do we get new sets of legendary backpacks? Do they go for a Generation 3 for weapons? Do they have that in them? And is that going to start coming out in Living World Season 5? I think it would be a good thing for this update to talk about that too. Alright, point number 5. We're getting to some things that I would like to see in the 30th, but I don't know how likely they are. Let's talk about PvP. We just mentioned World vs. World. We know that there's a renewed focus on World vs. World coming up with the Alliance update. It's just a long time. What about PvP? What about the other pillar of Guild Wars 2? Well, we know they're working on PvP. A new PvP map just got added. The 2v2 game type's been pushed. They're working on various things with tournaments. I'd like to see a bit on the 30th talk purely about PvP. And what I think they have that they can say is Dwayne's Duos. Now that they've got lots of 2v2 maps, we could do another Dwayne's Duos. I'd like to see some information about Swiss. I'd like to see maybe a new Tournament of Legends going up. You remember several months ago we had a Tournament of Legends and they said, look, this will become a thing again now. Where's our Tournament of Legends? I'd like to see weekly bonus events going on for PvP and that the devs embrace that somehow. I guess that's probably the gist of what we would see them doing there. They did say on the April 2nd post that there was going to be a fully staffed team PvP can like have access to or whatever. Does that mean we'll get something bigger? I think the craziest thing would be an announcement of another LAN. Imagine they announce an actual paid LAN for the community on the level of the ones we saw during Heart of Thorns, but scheduled for a year from now. That would be kind of insane for PvP. That would be the best thing you can see, but I think the probability is quite low, so don't, you know, don't hold out for it. I'm just saying this because I'm a big fan of the PvP in this game. Next, point 6. Let's look away from Living World. Well, we do know that the kind of theme of this announcement seems to be Living World themed, and they're obviously most interested in talking about the immediate future. It's not like ArenaNet to talk super distant into the future. I understand all of that. However, I do think the game is in such a shaky place where people's confidence is so shaken that ArenaNet cares about Guild Wars 2 on the long term. It might be a good idea for them to push further and actually talk to us about the next expansion. So, focus mostly on Season 5, but I would really like it, I wouldn't be surprised, because I think it's a good move, if they talked about or gave us a glimpse at Guild Wars 2 Cogs of War or whatever we go next. The Canthan expansion everyone wants, or the Char Homelands expansion everyone wants, or whatever it is that you've been holding out for in full expansion glory. I'd love to see that be announced. What I think would be really good for this announcement is to look at Season 5, get people excited about Season 5 with all these features and things they can do. But then also point out very clearly we still care about expansions. We know that expansions are what you guys like so much, right? And that we get the time to do all these massive, vast maps and work on assets and all that stuff. We still care about expansions. There will be another one. Okay, I'd love to see even just that. But if they gave us a tentative date of like a year from now, a year and a half from now, 2 years from now, that would be brilliant. A tiny teaser would be pretty cool too. You know, like how Bethesda treated their whole next Elder Scrolls expansion reveal. Just game reveal. You know, everybody's asking for it. They've got nothing to show. So they just throw a little teaser out. If ArenaNet did something like that, and they just had a little teaser showing that there will be another expansion, I think that puts the community into a really good place. People want to play an MMO that they feel has a future. And revealing that you're working on big boxed expansions, that does that for people. So I think that would be huge. And I think that would be huge for all the playtime everybody gets over Season 5, because you feel like you're going to build for something as the season goes along. So I'd like to see that, and I think there's a good chance if they have a similar opinion about all of this to me. But that moves me on to number 7. Now, this is what I'm most scared about, and I would actually be really disappointed if the 30th takes this angle, but hear me out. I think there is a chance that the 30th is all about Living World Season 5, and what the 30th's job is to convince you that there's no need for any more expansions. That the 30th show is a justification for staying with Living World forever. Now, here's the thought process. We know that ArenaNet makes pretty good money on the gem store, and when these Living World episodes come out, we know that Guild Wars 2 sustains, and it's in a really comfortable place, and that in theory, they could just keep doing Living World and Living World and Living World. So the fear is that the developers have seen that, the studio has seen how much money it's spending, the studio knows it wants to focus on other stuff, and to do a big expansion, it, brings in a ton of other stuff to do with marketing and scoping and whatnot, that maybe it's just not as cost effective to do expansions as it is to do regular Living World episodes and push the gem store well. Maybe it's not as cost effective. And maybe every time they've tried to make an expansion, like with Heart of Thorns and Path of Fire, it's rocked the studio too much and taken, messed up their other projects. So maybe ArenaNet's going into this next year or so thinking, look, we can't do any more Guild Wars 2 expansions. We want to get these other projects going. So let's convince the audience that Living World is all that matters. It's all that matters for their bottom line, in theory. So let's make the player base excited about just Living World. And you might find that if that could be the tack, that they're basically saying, no, there isn't another expansion. It's Season 5. But listen, Living World can do everything expansions can. Look, we're adding mounts in Living World. We're adding build templates in Living World. We're doing this and this and this in Living World. We're going to keep expanding the scope. We're killing dragons in Living World. The story is not restrained by it. I kind of look at Season 4 and the way the devs talked. They seem to be constantly saying that, that Living World is as good as expansions. But is the community convinced by that? I personally am not. And I think that if we move into a phase of Guild Wars 2 where there's an open admission that there will be no more full-on expansions, and the devs tried to sell it to us as like this budget thing. It's like, oh, look, you can play the game and you never have to buy a box again and all that kind of stuff. If we go into that phase, I think they'll see a massive loss of enthusiasm from a lot of people. I think a lot of the reason why many of us play these smaller patches, I don't want to say mini, because Living World patches are big, but I think the reason a lot of people play those patches is because they want to feel like the game is building to the next big thing. And expansions are so powerful for that. So that's my fear. That's my point number 7, that the 30th is entirely calibrated to make you happy with not having any more expansions. And that scares me. That's what I say today. Maybe if this actually happens, I will listen. I will give them a fair shot. Maybe they can convince me that having no more expansions ever can work out. But it'll have to be a damn good show to do that. And by the way, there's maybe some positive sides to that. If they did that, we have to look at like elite specializations. That could mean elite specs coming with Living World. That could mean that the 30th announcement says Living World returns in like a month. And with it, there's an elite specialization. We could be a month away from a new warrior elite specialization or something like that. Because if they never do any more expansions, they can bundle that into Living World itself. And so I think they'd go guns blazing if this is the idea. And hopefully there will be things to be excited about. But I'm nervous about it, and I don't like the thought of that being the tack for the show. I guess we'll see. So that brings me to my final point, point number 8. And this is a very low probability, I think, but it would be something quite nice. So much of my discussion here and so much of the community outlook and mindset right now, you'll see, is being defined by this information we have. We know the studio is working on other stuff. We know they had ambitions further than Guild Wars 2. We know that they want more and that Guild Wars 2 hasn't had the full resources it could have had over all these years. So everyone's curious about those other products. One thing I think could be in ArenaNet's favor and could work well for them is, well, what if they were open about their next ideas, right? If they're working on, say, a sci-fi MMO, such as that concept art we saw all those years ago, if they actually creaked the door open and said to the community, yeah, look, it's not a bad thing that we're working on other stuff because we can make great games, and here you can actually be a little bit excited about these games as well, okay? So maybe we might see, and this is, you know, pretty low probability, on the 30th, they'll talk majority about Living World and Guild Wars 2, but some kind of little hint or teaser or nod towards whatever else is going on in the studio to kind of bring the community into a loop, to stop us feeling like we're on the outside and the devs just keep messing up somehow and we don't know what to be enthusiastic about. You know, we have that whole clearly Guild Wars mobile game that was cancelled recently. Well, if the devs are kind of rebirthing some kind of other Guild Wars related IP or something, it might be nice to have a small nod there and actually crack that door open. It doesn't have to represent a massive change in communication policy, but just to allow the community to feel comfortable with the idea that ArenaNet wants to work on other stuff. That could be a good move for them, and I don't know, I'd like to see something like that obviously at the 30th, but I think it's a very low chance. So there you go. That's what I think about the 30th. I really do recommend you guys check it out. I will give you guys coverage and feedback as it comes out. We'll be talking in detail about all of this. This is going to define the next couple of years for Guild Wars 2. And it's a big moment, you know. There's other stuff to be excited about with MMOs. People want a reason to look at Guild Wars 2 and feel like it's going places. It really leans on the 30th. So I hope that the devs do very well. Overall, I think they just need to give an impression to everyone that they really care about this MMO and that it will be supported for years to come and it's worth playing. That's what I want to see, and we'll see how they handle it. So thanks, guys. Let me know what you think in the comments, and I'll be watching them very closely, and I'll see you for the next one very soon.